In a world where power often speaks the loudest, it's easy to believe that strength is measured only in how forcefully you can strike. But there comes a moment when silence is mistaken for weakness and patience is misread as surrender. Not long ago, the United States imposed its second tariff, an act meant to tighten its grip, to tilt the balance, to make another nation bow quietly under the weight of economic pressure. It was a move that said without words, we expect you to accept this, and we expect you to accept it quietly. But that is not what happened. Because what rose in response was not anger, not chaos, not the desperate noise of a wounded pride. What rose was something far greater. It was the stillness before a storm. It was the quiet confidence of a people who know exactly who they are. It was India standing, not flinching, not folding, standing. You see, this isn't just about tariffs and trade deficits. This is about identity. This is about the unshakable truth that dignity cannot be negotiated away, and self-respect does not come with a price tag. I want you to imagine it. From the dusty roads where farmers bend over their fields before the sun even rises, to the bustling streets of cities alive with the hum of industry, to the polished conference tables where leaders gather in hushed but firm conversation, the heartbeat of a nation began to drum louder, not in rage, but in resolve. And I believe that's where real strength lives. Not in how quickly you can hit back, not in how loudly you can shout your opposition, but in how clearly you can stand in your truth and say without trembling, this is who we are, and this is what we will not compromise. When the second tariff came down, some expected India to bend, some expected it to plead, some expected it to shrink into the shadows of larger powers. Instead, India lifted its chin, looked the challenge in the eye, and chose a different kind of fight, a fight not for revenge, but for respect. A fight not just in boardrooms or at trade tables, but in the hearts and minds of its people. This was not about shouting across oceans. This was about showing the world calmly, firmly, that when you know your worth, you do not need to match force with force. You answer pressure with presence. You answer control with clarity. You answer every attempt to diminish you with a quiet, unshakable no. And that no was not rejection, it was redirection. It was India saying, we will not be defined by what is done to us. We will be defined by how we choose to respond. I want you to understand something. The world is watching, not just the policies, not just the trade flows, not just the economic charts. The world is watching for who you are in the face of pressure, because in that moment, whether you are a nation or a person, your response becomes your identity. And here's what makes this story powerful. India's response wasn't just for the United States. It was for its farmers who wake before dawn, for its entrepreneurs who dare to innovate, for its young people who dream of building something greater than what they inherited. It was for every citizen who has ever been told to take less than they deserve, because when one stands tall, others remember they can too. Now I know, in a world hungry for instant reaction, where headlines move faster than truth, it can be tempting to believe that the loudest voice always wins, but history does not remember the noisiest, it remembers the most steadfast. And this moment, this was steadfastness in action. In the coming minutes, we're going to step inside the strategy, the patience, the long game that was played here. We're going to see how a country chose not to explode, but to expand, how it turned a challenge into a chance to reclaim the narrative, to demand a seat not at the corner of the table, but right at its center, because the future isn't handed over politely, it isn't gifted in an envelope or announced in a press release. The future is claimed by those who dare to show up for it, and that's exactly what we're about to witness. So as we move forward in this story, I want you to hold on to one truth. This isn't just a trade dispute. This isn't just a headline. This is a reminder. Whether you are leading a nation, running a business, raising a family, or simply navigating the challenges of your own life, there will come a day when someone or something will test you. They will try to see how much you can take before you break. They will expect you to accept less because it's easier for them if you do. And on that day, you will have a choice. You can shout and thrash and burn with anger, or you can stand like India stood, tall, steady, certain. You can let your strength speak, not in the noise of retaliation, but in the calm certainty of self-respect, because that is where the real power lives. And today, we're about to see just how powerful that can be. There is a moment in every story when the air feels different, when you can sense without anyone saying a word that something is about to shift. Picture it. A late evening in New Delhi, the sky is heavy with the last traces of daylight, painted in deep orange and gold, while inside the Prime Minister's office, a small group of advisors sits around a long table. The room is quiet except for the sound of papers being slid across polished wood, the rustle of reports, the occasional click of a pen, and then the news arrives. The United States has announced its second tariff, not a rumor, not speculation, official. It's there in black and white, broadcast across screens, echoed in the quick clip sentences of international reporters. Now here's what I want you to feel. This is not just a policy update. This is a statement. This is a message sent across oceans, not in the language of diplomacy, but in the cold precision of economics. And in that instant, a choice must be made. You see, the easy thing to do, the expected thing, would have been to react in the way the world predicted. Raise your voice, make threats, turn the temperature up until the air between two nations begins to burn. But that's not the choice India made. Instead, there was a pause, a deliberate stillness, the kind of pause that makes people wonder, what are they thinking? Because here's the truth. Silence, when it is rooted in strength, can be more unsettling than any shout. And in that room, on that night, India wasn't frozen, it was focused. Every leader, every advisor, every strategist understood something essential. When you are being tested, the first move is not to prove your anger, it is to protect your power. And power, true power, is never frantic. It is measured, it is intentional, it knows exactly when to act and when to wait. So while the headlines spun, while pundits speculated, while critics rushed to judge the lack of immediate retaliation, something was happening beneath the surface. Plans were being drafted, numbers were being studied, long-term effects were being calculated. Every option was placed on the table, not for how it would look today, but for what it would mean tomorrow. Because the real battle wasn't about winning the news cycle, it was about winning the future. And here's where the story turns into something much bigger than trade policy. This is where it becomes a masterclass in leadership, in patience, and in the art of responding, not reacting. India didn't just want to send a message back, it wanted to send the right message, a message that would not only be heard by the United States, but by the entire world. A message that said, we will not be cornered, we will not be underestimated, and we will not be rushed into playing a game we didn't design. So as the hours turned into days, as international markets watched and waited, India began to shape its answer. Not an emotional outburst, but a strategic move, crafted with the precision of someone who understands that every step you take on the global stage is watched, remembered, and measured. And that's the moment I want you to hold in your mind as we move forward. That moment in the quiet when the easy road was to match noise with noise, but the wiser road was to build something far more lasting. Because the truth is, this wasn't just about a tariff, it was about teaching the world that sometimes the most powerful sound is the sound of thinking before you speak. When that second tariff dropped, let's be honest, it wasn't just a line in a government statement, it was a test of character, of patience, and of the will to hold your ground when the ground beneath you feels like it's shifting. Because you see, tariffs, they're not just numbers on a spreadsheet, they're not just taxes on goods, they are signals, they are statements of intent. They are the world's way of saying, let's see what you're made of. And in that moment, the United States wasn't just adjusting trade policy, it was checking the pulse of a nation. It was asking, without asking, do you have the courage to answer in your own voice? This is where so many stumble, because when you are under pressure, whether you are a country, a company, or a single human being, it's tempting to answer in the way that's expected of you. You give them the script they've already written for you. You become predictable, you become manageable. But India didn't take that script. India wrote a new one. It's important to understand this wasn't about picking a fight. This wasn't about trying to outmuscle the United States. This was about something deeper. This was about protecting the one thing no nation, no leader, no human being should ever surrender: their dignity. Dignity doesn't roar to prove itself. It doesn't lash out to be seen. Dignity stands where it stands because it knows the value of the ground it's on. And that's exactly what India did. It didn't crumble under pressure. It didn't flinch when the world's cameras turned to see what would happen next. It simply stood with the weight of centuries of resilience behind it. Because here's the truth, when you've endured what India has endured, when you've risen from where India has risen, a tariff is not the thing that will break you. It becomes an opportunity to remind the world that power is not always about who can push harder. Sometimes power is about who refuses to be moved. And that's what made this moment so defining. The US might have been thinking about quarterly numbers, market advantages, and political leverage, but India was thinking about the bigger picture, about its farmers, its workers, its industries, its future. It wasn't just an economic calculation, it was a moral one. Because when you answer a challenge, you're not just negotiating terms, you're setting the tone for every conversation that follows. You're telling the world, this is how you will treat us, and this is how we will treat ourselves. And that's the heart of it, how you treat yourself. Because if you shrink yourself down to fit someone else's comfort, you teach them it's okay to keep shrinking you. But if you hold yourself at full height, even when it's uncomfortable, you remind them respect is not optional. So yes, the second tariff was about trade, but it was also about identity. It was about proving, not just to another country, but to the world and to every citizen watching, that you can't be defined by someone else's limits. And as we move forward in this story, I want you to keep that in your heart. The way you respond under pressure doesn't just shape the outcome of the moment, it shapes the way you are seen, the way you are remembered, and the way you see yourself. There's a kind of strength the world doesn't always understand. It's not the kind that pounds the table or rushes to make headlines. It's not the kind that needs to prove itself every second. No, it's quieter, it's steadier. It's the kind that waits until the right moment, and then, when it moves, it changes everything. That is exactly the strength India showed. When that second tariff was announced, many expected the response to come like a lightning bolt, fast, loud, and meant to scorch the ground. But what they got instead was a deep, unshakable calm, not hesitation, not fear, a calm that said, we know who we are, we know what we're doing, and we will answer in our time, not yours. That's the part people often miss about true resilience. Sometimes the most powerful move you can make is to not move at all until you're ready. And India's readiness wasn't going to be rushed. The first thing the world noticed, there was no shouting match, no angry press conference, no desperate bid to get even, just to satisfy the critics. Instead, India did what every seasoned leader, every wise negotiator, every strategist worth their salt knows how to do. It listened, it watched, it gathered every fact, every ripple, every potential consequence before deciding on the next step. And while others mistook that quiet for submission, the truth was far more powerful. Behind closed doors, conversations were happening, not just in government offices, but in industries, in trade hubs, in rural towns where the first impact would be felt. Leaders were asking the right questions. What is the real cost here? Who will feel this the most? How do we answer in a way that doesn't just address the moment, but secures the next decade? Because that's what makes the difference between reaction and strategy. Reaction is about winning the minute. Strategy is about winning the future. And here's the beauty of it. India's response wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about trying to hit harder, louder, or faster. It was about showing that when you act from a place of dignity and clarity, you don't need to mirror aggression to prove your power. They understood something crucial. The United States had acted from a position of economic leverage, but India would respond from a position of moral leverage. That meant making a choice not out of ego, but out of principle. And that principle was simple. We will not be diminished. We will not be dictated to. We will decide how this story is written. So when India's answer finally came, it wasn't an explosion. It was a steady, measured, precise statement of intent. Targeted tariffs, calculated trade adjustments, and partnerships with other nations that would soften the blow while strengthening alliances. It was a move that didn't just respond, it reshaped the board. And here's where it gets inspiring, because this isn't just a story about politics or economics. This is a story about you, me, and every single person who has ever faced pressure to act before they were ready. How many times in your own life have you felt cornered by someone else's timeline? How many times have you been told, if you don't react now, you'll lose? And how many times have you realized later that the best thing you could have done was to take a breath, step back, and respond from strength instead of panic? That's what India did, and it's a lesson worth carrying with us. When you hold your ground without letting your emotions run wild, you control the pace of the game. You set the tone. You show the other side that they cannot dictate your movements. And here's the thing, when you answer from that place of grounded strength, you don't just protect yourself in the moment, you earn respect for the long term. India's calm was not weakness, it was command. Its restraint was not passivity, it was preparation. And its final move was not just an answer, it was a statement that echoed far beyond the trade table. It told the United States, it told the world, and it told its own people, we are not here to be pushed into someone else's corner. We are here to stand in the center of our own story. And that story, it's still being written, but it has already taught a truth that is bigger than trade, bigger than politics. Power is not always about the volume of your voice. Sometimes it's about the weight of your silence and the precision of your action when the time is right. So when the cameras finally caught the response, it wasn't the wild swing so many had been waiting for. It was the kind of move that makes the other side stop, rethink, and realize we underestimated them. And that's the moment right there when the balance of power begins to shift. Because once you've proven you won't be rushed, once you've shown you can stand in your dignity without breaking, the conversation changes forever. You know, If you strip away the numbers, the policies, the diplomatic statements, what's left here is something so much more human. Because this moment between two nations, this clash, this stand at its core is about something each of us will face in our own lives. The truth is, we all have our second tariff moments. Moments when life decides to test us, not once, but again. You've already endured the first challenge, you've already proven you can stand, but here comes another push, another weight, another voice saying, let's see if you still believe in yourself. And here's what I know, how you respond to that second push defines you. Because the first time, maybe you were driven by adrenaline, by the raw will to survive. But the second time, that's when you find out if your strength was a moment or a mindset. That's where India's story becomes all of our story. When that second tariff came down, it wasn't just about trade, it was a mirror reflecting the question, do you know who you are when the world decides to press you again? And that is a question every one of us will answer, whether we're a nation navigating global politics, a business facing competition, or a person standing up for our own worth in a relationship, at work, or in our community. See, there's a universal truth here. Respect is not something you beg for. It's not something you bargain for. It's something you live in every single day until it becomes impossible for anyone to take it from you. That's what makes this moment with India so profound. They didn't just react because they were challenged. They responded because they knew who they were and they wanted the world to remember. And I want you to hear this. Sometimes when you stand for yourself, it's not just about you. It's about everyone who's watching you, everyone who will take courage from your courage and strength from your strength. Think about it. When India held its ground, it wasn't just sending a message to the United States. It was sending a message to its farmers who work before dawn, to its entrepreneurs who dare to dream, to its students who imagine a bigger future. It was saying, if we can stand for this nation, you can stand for yourself. And that's the thing about dignity. It's contagious. When people see it, when they feel it, when they watch it lived out in real time, it stirs something inside them. It reminds them that they too have the right to hold their heads high. Now here's where the lesson gets personal. How many times in your life have you been told to just accept something because that's the way it is? How many times have you been pressured to give in, not because it was right, but because it was easier for someone else? And how many times have you wished you had held out just a little longer, waited just a little more, so you could answer not from fear, but from strength? That's what this story teaches us. It teaches us that the most powerful response isn't always the loudest. It's the one that's aligned with who you are. It's the one that allows you to look back and say, I stayed true to myself. India didn't scramble to meet someone else's pace. It set its own pace. And in doing so, it reminded the world of something vital. When you set the terms for how you will be treated, you teach others that those terms are not negotiable. And I know sometimes holding your ground is lonely. Sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes it feels like the whole world is watching, waiting, doubting. But that's where your strength is forged, in the waiting, in the discomfort, in the moments where you have every reason to back down and you choose not to. And here's the thing, when you come through those moments, you're not just stronger, you're clearer. You're clearer about who you are, what you stand for, and what you will no longer tolerate. So when I look at India's response to this second tariff, I don't just see a nation playing a smart game of strategy. I see a living example of a truth I believe with my whole heart, that real power is not given. It is claimed, it is lived, it is demonstrated in 1,000 small and large choices until it becomes undeniable. And for anyone watching, whether you're in the middle of your own second tariff moment or you know it's coming, this is your reminder. You do not have to match aggression with aggression. You do not have to be loud to be heard. You do not have to move on someone else's schedule to prove your worth. You can stand, you can wait, you can let your presence speak louder than any threat you could ever make. Because just like India showed the world, when you know who you are, you don't just survive the test, you redefine it. Now here's the thing about dreams. They are fragile in the beginning. When they are just sparks in your imagination, they can be snuffed out by the smallest gust of doubt. The voices around you, and sometimes the loudest voice inside you, will tell you it's unrealistic, it's too late, you're not talented enough, or the market is too saturated. And if you let those voices take root, they'll bury your dreams before they ever see the light of day. That's why protecting your vision is a daily discipline, not a one-time decision. You can't just say, I believe in myself once and expect that belief to stay alive. You have to nurture it every single day. Feed it with action, and shield it from the poison of negativity. Every person who has achieved something extraordinary has had to fight this battle. Oprah didn't become a billionaire media icon because everyone believed in her from the start. She became who she is because she refused to let other people's disbelief rewrite her story. She understood that the world doesn't hand you permission slips to live your dream. You have to sign your own. And here's the truth most people don't want to hear. Nobody is coming to save you. Nobody is coming to pick you up off the couch, put the remote down and say, come on, let's go chase your destiny. That's on you, your dream, your responsibility. Think about the people you admire, the leaders, creators, innovators, and change makers. Do you think they were born with a magic ticket that said success guaranteed? No. They got there by showing up day after day, even when no one clapped for them, even when no one noticed their efforts, even when it felt like nothing was working. Most of the time, progress feels invisible until one day it explodes into something undeniable. But if you quit before that day comes, you'll never know how close you really were. That's the trap most people fall into. They start excited, full of passion, but the moment the road gets rough, the moment the applause fades and reality sets in, they slow down. They start questioning if it's worth it. And here's what I'll tell you, the moment you start doubting, push harder. Because that resistance you feel, that's the universe testing how badly you want it. If it were easy, it wouldn't be worth having. If there were no obstacles, there'd be no growth. The grind is where you separate yourself from the crowd. Anybody can show up when it's easy, when the money's flowing, when the likes are rolling in. But who are you when the lights are off? When you're alone in your room, questioning yourself, wondering if you're wasting your time? That's the moment where winners are made. Not on the stage, not in the spotlight, but in the shadows where no one is watching. That's where you build the resilience that will carry you through every storm. And let's be clear, resilience doesn't mean you never feel like quitting. It means you feel like quitting, but you don't. You get up anyway. You keep going anyway. You find a way forward, even if you have to crawl. It's about refusing to let your current circumstances dictate your final destination. You have to hold on to the belief that the effort you're putting in now is building something you can't yet see. That belief is what keeps the fire alive when everything around you feels cold. So if you're sitting here right now with a dream that scares you, good. It means it's big enough to change your life. But understand this, it will require more from you than you think you have. It will demand sacrifice, late nights, early mornings, and moments where you question your own sanity. And yet if you keep showing up, keep protecting that dream from doubt, keep taking action no matter how small, you will look back one day and realize you've built something unstoppable. The choice is simple, but it's not easy. You can either protect your dream until it grows strong enough to protect itself, or you can hand it over to the world and let it get torn apart before it's even born. The question is, which kind of person are you going to be?